And now it's time to introduce our main speaker, John A.
Boy, wow. My name is John Ackerlund and I'm an alcoholic. I am enthusiastic about this program. I'm very grateful for this way of life. It's terrific. Oh, is it possible that you can turn on the light back there? Please. I am not a professional speaker and I want to see you. Please put on the light. That's great. Thank you very much. You know, I am really privileged to ask to talk here tonight. I love the young people in AA. And, you know, you look a little suspicious, you know, this old guy, you know. For your information, a few years ago, there was the Young People's International in Seattle. And they asked me to talk on Saturday night. And it really, I don't know, it overwhelms me. So, and the great thing in Alcoholics Anonymous, that really has nothing to do with age. I love birthdays in Alcoholics Anonymous. It isn't really natural for alcoholics to be sober, and it's a big deal, and happy birthday to all of you. It's beautiful. And I feel a little strange tonight. I came in and there have been 6 requests that please tell about that, you know. And, well, it so happened that we talk about recovery program, or programs for living, you know, and you know, what did we have? We had the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. If you think it, you have done it, and you have burned, you know. And I always had. I had religion 14 years, 2 hours a day at school, and I learned a lot about fear of God. I have been sober since 1962, the 1st of October. You know, you know, that's a long time. And you know, in Alcoholics Anonymous, I have learned the love of God instead of the fear of God. And that's beautiful. You know, and you know, then our co-founder, God bless him, Bill W., he was 12-stepped with a guy named Ebby. He came from the Oxford group that had a formula for living. It was the 4 absolutes: honesty, selfishness, love, and purity. And do you think that Ebby came to Bill Wilson and said, listen to this: honesty, unselfishness, love, and purity? And Bill would say, oh my God, that's what I have been looking for all my life, you know. I don't think so. I think he said something to the effect that, you know, I drink like you drink, and sometimes I have to be in the wagon. And then when I am in the wagon, it seems like it is easier for me to wagon if I talk to another drunk. And I think that's about something to that effect that happens when they met. And then Bill, he met Bob in Akron. And that was a couple of days of, they talked to one another. And Dr. Bob said to him in one of those meetings that, you know, I've gone through facilities like this hospital I'm in right now about 22, 23 times. I have talked to all the experts and all the learned men about what's wrong with me. What the hell do you think you can say to me that I haven't heard already? And Bill said, you don't understand, I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me. If I talk to you and talk to another alcoholic, I might stay sober another day. And then Bob said, please sit down and let us talk. And that's when AA began. So then it took a little while, and then we got the 12 steps. And the 12 steps is really the same thing as the 10 Commandments. The only difference is it's all in positive. We took these steps, we do these things, we take this action, and it's all in positive. And there are some promises. If we do these things, there are some promises. And it's a beautiful thing. So what they decided to do, they were, well, now we have this, and if we hear about something that may sound good, we'll try that too. And you know, one of the first things they came up with that they were going to try with LSD, it would cure alcoholism, you know. And Bill W., he was a guinea pig. Anything that could help alcoholics, he would try it. So he tried LSD, and he found out right away that this is not the way to go, you know. But I tell you, at the time, you know, I have lived in Laguna Beach 36 years, and you knew Chuck Chamberlain. I was his neighbor for 25 years, and I was spoiled with wonderful things about Alcoholics Anonymous and so on. But there was a psychiatrist in Laguna Beach. He advertised in the local paper and said, you know, if you're alcoholic, I cure alcoholism with LSD. Sign up, you know. And there were 22 people from the Canyon Club in Laguna Beach that signed up, you know. And they had a meeting. There's a famous historical house that's called the Moss Street House. And next to it, right down on the ocean, there was an old, very wealthy gay guy that had this big house, and they had meetings in his house, you know. So here they had sessions twice a week, you know. There was about 66 people in that group, you know. And some of my friends were there. You know, and here they sat and popped LSD, you know, and had spiritual exchanges, you know. And you know, and this jet plane from the El Toro airport flew over, you know, the house, you know. And they said, wow, man, what was that? You know what I mean? And it, fantastic, you know. And the old gay guy, he said, have you ever jacked off an LSD, you know? Nothing like it, you know. Well, that was LSD in Laguna Beach, you know. 90 days later, they were all picked up and put in Camarillo Mental Hospital, including the doctor, because he was on it too, you know. So, now, that was your request, you know, and I always aim to please, you know. You know, I come in these days in these rooms, and there's always some old guy that says, oh, him again, you know. It happens when you're old in AA. A bunch of years ago, I was invited to speak in Flagstaff at the conference. The guy invited me was old like myself, and I asked him, I said, you invited me here 7 years ago, 11 years ago, 19 years ago, and 27 years ago. I said, why do you invite me again? He said, I wanted to hear you one more time before you die. He said, you know. It was funny then, you know. Besides that, I'm absolutely the most famous substitute speaker on the West Coast, you know. And that happened long ago. That started long ago. You know, 36 years ago, 37 years ago, you know, sometimes the circus speakers were invited to 2 different locations the same weekend. And Dr. Paul, you call him, God rest his soul, he was only a year sober, but he was already a circuit speaker. He was invited to Vancouver, Canada, and Hawaii the same weekend, and his wife Max wanted to go to Hawaii, and God rest her soul. In fact, my wife sponsored Mac for many years when we were being with dear friends. But anyhow, they said, why don't we send John to Vancouver? And that was my first big deal. You know, come up to Vancouver, my friend, the guy who invited me to the airport, his name was Corky Berg, and he took me to a hotel. There were 4,500 people at that conference. And we stood up Friday afternoon in the hotel lobby, and everybody milling around, and this lady came up to Corky and said, how are you? He said, I'm really good, how are you? And she said, you don't remember me, do you? And she said, honey, I'm rather busy with this gentleman right now. So she left. And I said, Corky, she wanted to talk to you. You don't have to babysit me. Everybody are friendly. Go and talk to her. So he left, came back 10 minutes later, said, that's the goddamnest thing I ever run into. I said, what happened, Corky? He said, I came over there and said, hi, how are you? She said, you don't remember me. He said, sure, what meeting did I meet you at? She said, for God's sake, man, I was your second wife, you know. A little bit of a blackout, I suppose, you know. I talk to newcomers. I love the feelings in these rooms with our newcomers, and I like being a newcomer myself. I would like to remember when I was new in Alcoholics Anonymous. When I had been coming to meetings for about 2 weeks, and I came home and I lay down, I said, my God, something is going on in these rooms. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was a special feeling. Something is going on in these rooms. You know, I was comfortable here. I also like to remember the last year I drank, because I compromised on everything I believed in or stood for. I couldn't live or function without liquor. I didn't dare to go to sleep if I didn't have a fifth of whiskey in the refrigerator, because I had to have it when I woke up. And if I ran out of booze at midnight, I usually called an associate of mine in Baldwin Park, and I said, Harold, next week, you will owe me $150 on this particular job, but if you give me $20 tonight, you won't have to pay me the $130 next week. And I drove 100-mile round trip at midnight to pick up $20. I didn't dare to buy any booze in Baldwin Park, because then I wouldn't make it home. And when I came home to Anaheim, where we lived at the time, I bought a fifth of Imperial Bourbon for $4.85. And then I was safe, and I had to live like that. I hope I never forget that period in my life. It really was a son of a bitch. For the record, my grandfather died from alcoholic delirium in 1910. He lived in a 2,000-acre place outside Stockholm. They were breeding racehorses, beautiful people, but he died from alcoholic delirium. My father had problems with his liver in 1927, and nobody knew anything about this illness then. He was a giant of a man. He radiated vitality. Women adored him. Men envied him. But he died 3 years later, and he only weighed 130 pounds when he died. And he didn't want to die at all, and he didn't have much of a chance. I was 8 years old then. And, you know, it is something to see. A beautiful human being like he once was. You know, he was 6'2". When touch you realize his strength, but in 3 years it deteriorated absolutely nothingness. He was just a shriveled up little yellow-green thing that it was terrifying to see. My older brother, you know, my father was an aristocrat. He was vain and proud and arrogant. But he was also a very loving person, but there was some violence. And thanks to our program, I've been able to deal with that. 99 out of 100 meetings I go to, we finish with the Lord's Prayer. And there is a line that says, forgiven as I forgive those who trespass against me. And I assure you that I was stuff in my inventory I wish I could be forgiven about. And then we can't have two standards here. I'm supposed to be forgiven. I'm supposed to have an opportunity for new life. But anybody that did something to me, justice for them or whatever you want to call it, it's an important point. Because if we don't address this issue, we will come in as victims and we will remain victims, and it will interfere in our own recovery, and that's why I bring it up. That's why adult children of alcoholics started, you know. But I had an I had a great fortune of finding a way in Alcoholics Anonymous program to deal with that issue. My older brother was a year and 9 months older than I was. He didn't have much of a chance for another reason. He had a little bit of pride, and it seems to be a commodity. We can't afford a luxury in this outfit. 20-some years ago now or more, he lived in a castle outside Stockholm, married a very beautiful girl. In fact, he married my girlfriend. I had a little bit of problem with that for a while, but no, I'm glad he did. But he drank like I drank, and he blew it on. For 18 years, he defended his right to drink. You know, here's this guy living in this castle, like my father did when he lived, and had 4 beautiful children. He was in charge of a simple rubber factory, most of it over the Scandinavian countries. It was a fantastic evening. My brother, he carried a Swedish flag in the Olympics on 3 occasions. And he was in gymnastics and water polo for the Swedish team. And fantastic. But he drank. And he did a lot of things and justified them, So his wife finally divorced him. My brother lived in a room that cost $15 a month for 18 years, I flew over there in 1970. First I wrote him a letter, 1.5 pages what I used to be like, and 3.5 pages about all the wonders that has happened to me since I joined the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I got a postcard back. He said, "Dear John, I'm sorry to hear about all your problems." Identification, no way. I flew to Stockholm in 1978 and spent a couple of weeks with him. I invited him out here. He was here with me. I took him to AA meetings. One night after a Wednesday night meeting at Lynn Wilder, he had a party in his home down in Monarch Beach, and my brother was handsome as hell, 6'4", dark, mysterious. He spoke 6 languages fluently, and he was absolutely charming, And here, Lynn gave him a tall highball glass of scotch, and my brother stood there for about 3 hours, and all the young women in AA, that 26 and 30 in that age group, there was about 20 or 30 of them. They were up there rubbing up against him, and my brother, had a wonderful time, and he was here for a whole month, The last night he should fly back to Sweden. I said, "What do you think about this?" So you don't understand. I don't want to quit. It's the only thing that's real in my life. When I sit down and drink by myself and dream about when I was on top of everything, And I understand. He flew home. He died 11 months later from the prime of his life. My younger brother went to Scripps 30 years ago. They told him his liver was shot, he shouldn't drink anymore. He's still drinking, And sometimes you and I wonder, what's wrong with people like my brothers? There was really nothing wrong with them. Alcohol did something for my older brother to the day he died. It's still doing something for my younger brother. And that's the nature of the illness. And that's why I said that you and I are the lucky ones. Because of the evidences in these rooms that people like you and I, the way we drank and carried on, we can change and live without and have fabulous lives. Now, nothing wrong about having a fabulous life in Alcoholics Anonymous, I assure you. I didn't start to drink until I was 31 years old. See, when my father died, I promised my grandmother I was never going to drink, so I didn't drink. And then I was employed by this door factory in Alhambra, and he was a drunk, and he wanted to have somebody to drink with, And my wife and I met my Karen in Stockholm, and she was 17 years old, and she was absolutely precious. She was gorgeous as hell, When she was 42 years old, she was Venus de Milo at the Art Festival in Laguna Beach, She was terrific. 17 years old, and I married her, and we came over here in 1948 to start a new life, and so I started to drink. The strangest thing happened when I started drinking. I drank a fifth of booze a day from day one. For 2 years, I was never drunk, never hungover. I just felt good. And that's how it was for me for the first 2-3 years of my drinking. It was the best thing that ever happened. I needed a drink long before I started to drink. And, you know, and I had some class, you know. You know, I went out there and I selling doors, you know, and to the big developers, you know. I came home, you know, and had a tub full of, a hot full of bath, you know, a hot bath, and I mixed myself with double martini, you know, and I climbed in that tub, you know, and I lay down in that tub and I smoked a camel and I drank that martini and I spit it out, the pimento, you know, and I had a lot of class, you know what I mean? And you know that I had, when I had 3 years of sobriety, my wife started to complain. And then from then on, it was a daily deal. She tried to prove I was alcoholic, and I tried to prove to her I was not, you know. First time she came and said, Yanni, if you don't stop drinking, I go back to Sweden. I said, please, Karen, don't do this to me. You have no idea how well I'm doing, you know. And then she came and said, you know, if you don't stop drinking, you have to move out. Okay? We had 4 kids, you know. And so I stopped drinking. Then 2 weeks later, things were worse. I said, Karen, it ain't the booze. You know, I haven't had a goddamn drink for 2 weeks. We're still screaming at each other. It's not the booze. So I took a drink again. I said, why have I denied myself this pleasure for so long? You know, it's crazy, you know. And then started another phenomena 2 years later. Every time I stopped shaking, every time I stopped drinking, I got the shakes. I can't call them my goddamn customers, you know, shaking and carrying on like this. So then I discovered a double shot of booze, stopped the shakes, I could function and work. So now I had to drink all the time. It was fantastic, you know. And the conversation, you know, I mean, it was all alcoholic in my home, you know. I used to say to her, I have to go down to the market and buy a loaf of bread and a fifth of milk, you know. One time we stopped outside the Isles Party Pantry in Anaheim, and I stopped there every night before I went home. And so I said to my wife, I said, you see that guy over there with a brown paper bag? It was in July. He had an overcoat on and hat and this brown paper bag, you know. And I said, you know, he's an alcoholic. And she said, how do you know that? I said, every day I'm here, he is here, you know. The next phenomena with my drinking was that I stopped drinking, you know, and 3 days later I sat in my bed at 3 in the morning, looked in front of me, and this big white snake came out of the wall. You know, I never saw anything like it in my life. He came right out of the wall. He was snow white, had 3 black eyes, this big in diameter, and his fattest part, and he was 23 feet long. And he came slowly across the room, stopped in front of my face, and started to hiss at me. I could even smell him. He smells like death, to tell you the truth, you know. And I sat down and said to myself, you know, I haven't had a drink for 3 days, and it can't be the booze, you know. Anybody here had hallucinations or something like that happening, or are you all a bunch of high-bottom drunks in this hall tonight? Huh? You know, my experience with that snake was this, that the closer he came, the more I screamed. And the screams in my own head on my own screen reached such a crescendo, it was eventually like my brain exploded from my own screams. That was my experience. Karen told me in the morning, said, something strange happened this morning around 4 o'clock. She said, you sat straight up, looked in front of you for quite a while, and then you said, ee. That's all it was, folks, you know. You know, the third time that happened, I said to myself, you know, this only happens when I stop drinking. I will never, ever stop drinking again. That's how it was for me. One night I made love to her when she wasn't even there. That's kind of tricky. She was actually laying 2 feet away from me there, and she said, what are you doing over there? And I said, I beg your pardon, And when she realized what was going on, she started to laugh at me. I started to cry. I felt it was so humiliating to laugh at the guy who was doing his best, In the morning, I had been out in the kitchen. I'd had my codeine cough medicine and my whiskey. And she met me in the hallway, and she said, well, good morning, lover boy, I didn't feel any pain. I just smiled. I said, that's the best peace I've had in a long time. So, needless to say, I love laughter in Alcoholics Anonymous. To me, that in itself is a spiritual experience. Anything that you and I laugh about in these rooms was absolutely the deepest tragedy when it happened. But when you and I in this manner of identification, when it comes to this insanity and this denial, can laugh about the whole mess, it makes it possible for us to forgive ourselves and change. It's very much part of the recovery program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I tried few things before I came into Alcoholics Anonymous to stop drinking. We went to a minister for a year and a half, and he counseled me. And he said one time, you have to ask God to help you. And I said, Walter, you don't understand. You are not like I am. You don't talk to your wife the way I talk to mine in the evenings, when she corners me about my drinking. God doesn't want anything to do with me. And that gentleman, he read a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous to find out how he could help me. And he realized that him and I, we lacked identification, and I had to find my bottom further down alone. He even suggested a program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had no idea what that meant. When he wouldn't talk to me anymore, he suggested a psychiatrist in Santa Ana. I spent $2,000 with this doctor. There wasn't anything he said to me that Karen didn't tell me for free 3 times a day, There wasn't anything he said to me either that wasn't the truth. Everything he said was the truth. One time he stood on and said, Johnny, you know what's wrong with you? And I said, tell me, Doc. And he told it all my secrets and all my emotional problems. And I said, Doctor, you're absolutely right, and that's why I drink, because I can't stand myself the way I'm put together, And so that was that, And last item before I came into Alcoholics Anonymous was a Sunday morning at Thrifty Mart at 10 o'clock. I was picked up trying to steal a pint of liquor for $3.57. And you should have seen me then. I was drunken and shaven. I weighed 246 pounds. I couldn't even defend myself. I came from a beautiful home under the most favorable circumstances. But that morning I looked exactly like a person who has to steal a pint of liquor to live. 2 days later, Karen comes and says, Johnny, for years because of the children we have stayed together. But now because of them we have to part. And either you go down and try that thing called Alcoholics Anonymous, you have to move out again. That's the only reason why I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. I just didn't want to be kicked out again. The second day there, my sponsor-to-be, his name was Charlie Vick, 12-stepped me, And Sherry and I had the same sponsor, and Charlie was wonderful. And he 12-stepped me, and when he started telling me his story, I realized he was worse than I was, and he depended more than I did on it, and he was sober. I said, you were really like that, and you don't have to drink. And he said, that's right. And I said, well, you don't understand. Every time I stop drinking, I get the shakes, and weird things happen to me when I stop drinking. And he said, Johnny, you will only shake for 4 or 5 days, and then you never have to shake again as long as you leave it. And that's when I broke. I just, please show me what to do. So I started in Alcoholics Anonymous. The first night I was in a meeting, I just said, please, God, help me today to stay sober, and it wasn't a big deal. I always thought that a spiritual experience would be something like, yes, John, what can I do for you? No way. But it was like this. It came to me like, perhaps after all this, there's a way for me too. When I came home that night, I said to Karen, I said, I don't have to drink anymore. Something happened tonight. And she said, your eyes look different. I haven't had a drink of codeine, cough medicine, strange pills of funny things, cigarettes that day in 42 years and 8 months and 10 days ago today. It's incredible, I had 10 days of sobriety. I had 10 days of sobriety. I sat in a meeting and blurted out. I said, I feel so goddamn guilty. And you know, I came in here. I was not in a good place. I wanted to be a good father. I knew I wasn't. I had $36,000 worth of unpaid bills. And my wife had had a suicide attempt in Palm Springs a couple of years before I came into AA. And I realized I had broken her spirit, and it was a son of a bitch, you know. So I had not much going for me. And anyhow, so I said, I feel so goddamn guilty. And this guy said, the reason you feel so guilty is because you're guilty, you know. And then I realized it's true. And then when we can accept the fact that this is how it really is, then something happens to us, you know. And then it came to me like, no matter what, I'm not going to drink again. Now we have that going for us. And you know, that night when I should go home after that meeting, we had a Lord's Prayer after the meeting, and I stood out and regretted that I had copped out and admitted it was my fault. And then we wonder how he's going to have power greater than ourselves in our life. I tell you what happened to me when I stood up. This guy walks up. I never saw him before, and he just put his arm around me and said, Johnny, everything is going to be all right. And I believed him, you know. And that's how it is here, you know. We don't have to go through nothing alone anymore, you know. I had about 60 days of sobriety. And when we 60 days of sobriety, you know, and when after the meeting somebody who said those days that, hey, why don't you go home to me and have a Coca-Cola and a coffee and talk a little bit? So I said that, I have 60 days. I said, why don't you guys come home to me and we have some coffee and Coke? So 14 guys came home to my house, you know. And then we stood down and talked about what a hell of a meeting we had had, what Bill had said, what Fred had said, and Maggie and all that thing. And then my wife comes out and come out with this cardboard box and put it on the living room table. And then she said, yeah, I know you guys are absolutely freaking terrific, but what in the hell are we going to do with these? It was all the bills that was unpaid that she put down the living room. Oh, Jesus Christ. And guys brought through down there. One guy said, they can't kill you and they can't eat you. I said, did you hear that, Karen? You know. And then Charlie says, you know, Johnny, you got to go to work. And I said, you mean without nothing? And he said, yeah, without nothing. Oh, Jesus Christ. So the next morning at 8 o'clock, Charlie was at the door and said, we are going. And what I forgot to tell you, the day after I had been picked up for stealing that pint of liquor, I came into one of my best accounts in Anaheim, Dykstra and Drake, and the secretary said to me, Johnny, I saw you in the market yesterday. Oh, Jesus Christ. I just walked out of there, you know. So Charlie, he doesn't know about it. I didn't dare to tell him that I was a common thief, you know what I mean? So I hadn't told him about Dykstra and Drake. And he drove right down to their office and said, go in there and give them a bid. And I said, please. He said, get your ass in there and give them a bid. So I go in there. There's Helen sitting behind her desk, and she looked disgusted, you know. I said, could I give you a bid? And she said, over there in the corner. So I took off the frames, jams, doors, waters, finished lumber, and all that thing, and I installed it all. I was a subcontractor to big developers, you know. So then I'm through with that, and then I went over to her desk, and I stood down. She looked at me, and then her face changed, and she said, oh my God, you are on drinking. And I said, Helen, I have 60 days today. And she said, oh, John, I have a brother-in-law at 2 years in AA. You were going to be all right. And then I came out and I said to Charlie, I said, I gave them the bid. You know. He said, let us go down to the club and have a cup of coffee. And I stood there with my mug, you know, and I said, God damn it, I gave them a bid. And Charlie said, let us do it again. I said, well, so we do two calls in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, 3 in the morning, 3 in the... And you know, Charlie stayed with me for 90 days until I had enough courage to call on and do my work on my own. It's a beautiful thing what's going on here. They go through anything with us, you know. You know, and now I like to tell you that I have this Rolex here. And anyhow, I had a couple of months of sobriety. Karen meets me in the hallway. Before you had a booze as a crutch, now you have those goddamn meetings. Are you that kind of a weakling you can't stand on your own 2 feet? I said, I suppose so. Then I go out and I work all day. I come home at 5:15 to have a bite to eat before I go to my meeting. There's 25 phone calls about the people I owe the money to. I had no money, no income yet. I didn't know what to do about it. So I called Charlie. I said, Charlie, they want my money. And he said, no, Johnny, they want their money. He said, I'll tell you what happened. I worked every day. I went to a meeting every day. I didn't drink every day, and I bought money orders twice a month, and it took me 3.5 years to pay back that $36,000. When I had paid back that $36,000, there was no resentment because I had bought my freedom, and it was a very important part of my recovery program of Alcoholics Anonymous, So then I went to my meeting. I have a reprieve here for an hour and a half, and I come home at 10:30, 11 o'clock, supposed to thank God for my sobriety that day. And I lay down in my bed and I said, God, what a terrible, terrible day I had. What an absolutely terrifying day I've had. And then I said, yes, but I didn't drink. And I said, what's going on? I used to get drunk over a lot less. And then it begins, because then we start to realize that this thing called sobriety, that's mine. It's the only decent thing that has happened to me in a long time. It may be some sort of a gift or something, And then begins the consistency in our living, and then we add to it. And from now on, everything is God's business, good and bad. And if God is part of the bad stuff is just a period within a period. And we have gone through that period, we realize that's why we had to go through, and it all starts to fall in place. So this thing being sobriety, that's the big deal here. Many people say, when will my ship come in? This is the ship, Well, so, I should tell you something. So then my sobriety is right. My AA life is good. My work starts to go better. The kid come home from school. Hi, Dad, can we talk now? The kids are in place. Every day you and I stay sober, life is getting better in spite of us. And there have been days in my life, in my sobriety, the only thing that was right that day was that I didn't drink I didn't drink that day. And it's worthwhile to fight for. Don't give up before the miracle happens. Karen didn't believe I was going to stay sober when I came in. And tell you the last 4 years I drank, I was in the wagon several times, and every time we became friends. I always went back to drinking, and so she didn't dare to believe it, And you and I, we hope they will believe us, but when I realized she didn't dare to believe it. And we are here, and we have this whole support group here, and we don't have to go through nothing alone anymore, Then 3 years later, Karen comes and says, Johnny, it wasn't always your fault. I said, now I can die, Long ago, she said, this life we live today is really the most fabulous adventure. And it was so hopeful and tragic at one time to completely turn around. There's even a degree of innocence between us today, and that's almost impossible to believe, but that has come to pass because she is just as busy in Al-Anon as I am in AA. We have seen so many people over the years have turned around and started to be good to one another. Nothing is in vain. All that bad stuff you and I had to cost and will benefit somebody else down the line, so don't even worry about it right now. Just take care of your own sobriety and come to meetings. So then we work the 12 steps, and it's a fantastic formula for living. Let us face it. I never fitted in out there. I could never be part of it. If I wasn't the center of attention, I wouldn't even play. I always wished I was somebody else. And thanks to this way of life in this program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and let's face it this much, alcoholism, it's the #1 killer, second contributor to insanity. It's a fact. There is no cure for it except abstinence. And there is no cure for it. And thanks to this way of life and this formula for living, many of us, we live out there, we fit in, we are part of it, we have a purpose. Think how many people that were sponsoring here and helping one another. There's a purpose for living here, to do some good for somebody else except ourselves. I'd be so bold to say many of us that practice the way of life, we live out there like we don't have the illness. Tell that to a guy who has heart and cancer or some other fatal disease. As far as I'm concerned, you and I, we are no victims. You and I have an opportunity to participate in life and live in thanks to this way of life. Nobody have the breaks that you and I have. You all knew, if you can just believe, we only wish you well and we only want good things for you. If you can just believe that and take that with you, you will never wake up lonely anymore, because you know by now there's a way to go and to live, you know. And then lastly, you know, I am supposed to get off at 25, so I have 7 minutes. You know, this is an oyster perpetual. You know, I have a friend in Glendale. His name is Bob Lemkin. He's a full-blooded German. And I had a little problem with the Germans during the war, you know what I mean. Don't wave. I get off. Just a minute. You know, 29 years ago, you know, Bob Lemkin, he talks kind of funny. I was invited to speak at his 12th birthday in Glendale, and he's one of these staunch newcomers that you don't save any souls after 10, you know. So it was 10 o'clock. I had a minute and a half to wrap up my story, just like right now. And he's sitting at the back at the door, and he screams, "Johnny, for God's sake, it's 10. I said, "Lemke, this is only an AA meeting. We ain't marching into Poland tonight, you know." Last January, I gave Bob his 41st birthday. He's a great AA, help a lot of people. So, now, listen to this. This is important. Today is the 10th of June. Today is the 70th anniversary of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is the 70th birthday. Thank you for asking me to see. Abstinence is a spirit, you know, abstinence is a spiritual environment. It isn't natural for alcoholics not to drink. But as long as you and I have abstinence, we have a chance. And we sit here in these rooms, and we cannot help that we identify. Yeah, right on, right on. And you know, we heard it before today from some people, you know, and we always felt different. And there came a day in my 10th and 11th step, and I said, I am just like they are, and they are just like I am. And God damn it, if they can do it, I can do. I was part of something for the first time in our life. And what is what's wrong with us? Part of the illness. We overfeel in all directions. If I feel bad, I feel really bad. If I feel good, I feel like I'm better than Jesus Christ, you know. Absolutely, that's how it is. And what is it? It is this. You and I, we compare our inside about other people's outside. That's part of our thing. We are so emotional about things. So here's abstinence, and we sit here and we identify. And then, right on, why didn't I understand that before? And then I have something even deeper than that's called moments of clarity. One night I took my 10th and 11th step and I said, God, why was I so lucky that I grabbed it and ran with it and took it and lived by it? Why didn't my brothers? They needed it as much as I did. How many people have you and I tried the 12th step over the years? They don't want what we got. It's incredible. And then, you know, there are times when I feel like I don't want to go to a meeting tonight. I can't stand listening to that goddamn chapter 5 another time, you know. And I went to 7 meetings a week the first year. I've gone to 5 meetings ever since. So still I go. And I sit down in that meeting and I hear precisely what I needed to hear. And then I can't help but reflect, God, I'm so grateful I was here. If I hadn't been there, I hadn't heard it, I'd missed out on it. Ladies and gentlemen, the moments of clarity in the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the music in AA. And you all knew, do this, do what we do. Don't drink and come to meetings. It's the best deal in town. Thank you.